Welcome to Robot Elf Book Club once again. This is a podcast where we read and discuss recently released science fiction, fantasy, and genre adjacent books. On this episode of the podcast, we're going to start with a little bit of housekeeping, just by way of explanation. I know that you've been eagerly waiting the January episode. It was canceled. It is late February at the time we were recording this. We had been planning to, or I guess I had been planning to do a most anticipated books of 2023, and that turned out to be more effort than I was willing to expend over my holiday break. And I also read a science fiction novel that wasn't all that great, and I don't want to talk about it. So that just kind of didn't really work out for me.
Well, I read one that was really good, so maybe it balances out.
Oh yeah, you'll have to remind me what that was. This particular episode is a little bit late. We had some health challenges in my house, and I don't want to divulge anyone's personal health history, but someone in my household had a disastrously low vitamin level, which is being rectified, and things kind of fell apart for a few weeks, but we're back to normal now. Everyone is healthy and happy. And so on this exciting return to the airwaves, we are going to be talking about the novel LARK Ascending by author Silas House. This book was published on September 27th, 2022 by Algonquin Books. We didn't choose a more recently released title because it turns out that in December, it was very slim pickings in terms of genre books. There were, some, third and fourth installments in different fantasy series, which obviously are not good picks for us. So we went back a few months to see what piqued our interest, and this was where we landed. And Nico, if you would, we didn't introduce ourselves. I'm Rose.
I feel like if you got to this point in our podcast, we've introduced ourselves a lot, but I'm Nico.
I'm Nico. You're Nico. I'm not Nico. You're Nico.
Yeah, I'm Nico.
And you generally favor us with a wonderful reading of the plot synopsis. So if you happen to have that handy, if you would, please give us a dramatic reading.
It says, with fires devastating much of America, Lark and his family first leave their home in Maryland for Maine. But as the country increasingly falls under the grip of religious nationalism, it becomes clear that nowhere is safe, not just from physical disasters, but also persecution. The family secures a place on a crowded boat headed to Ireland, the last place on Earth rumored to be accepting American refugees. Upon arrival, it turns out that the safe harbor of Ireland no longer exists either, and Lark, the sole survivor of the transatlantic voyage, which, spoilers for the first 15% of the book, thanks, synopsis, must disappear into the countryside. As he runs for his life, Lark finds two equally lost and desperate souls, one of the last remaining dogs, who becomes his closest companion, and a fierce, mysterious woman in search of her lost son. Together, they form a makeshift family and attempt to reach Glendalough, a place they believe will offer protection. But can any community provide the safety that they seek? LARK Ascending is a moving and unforgettable story of friendship and bravery, and even more, a story of the ongoing fight to protect our personal freedoms and find our shared humanity from a writer at the peak of his powers. These blurbs they have at the end about how great the author is just really bother me.
Yeah, they really worked hard to sell the book in that blurb. And yeah,
it actually did describe the book, though. Like a lot of the ones we read are like, what book was that? This one
exactly.
This is like literally the book we read, to the point where I don't even know if I need to read it now because you just told me what happened.
Exactly. I was feeling kind of bad about the fact that we're not going to be able to talk about the plot very much without heading into spoiler territory, because of the fact that when you start reading the book, you know the basics of what is happening, but you don't know exactly, what's going to unfold. But like spoiling that Lark is the only member of his party that makes it is kind of, anyway. Yeah. So this book was written by an author of literary fiction. It was published as literary fiction. Nico and I are, science fiction and fantasy fans. We're genre fans. And so I think that probably we judged this book by standards that it wasn't intended to meet. So I just want to say that. I think the thing that piqued our interest about this book is the fact that it is a post-apocalyptic story.
I'm always down for post-apoc survival.
Let's see, yeah. And not necessarily a very fantastic one. It was sort of a very plausible potential future, if you ask me. But yeah, it's what do I want? What do I want to say to preface this?
Well, I was thinking it would be more of an adventure, and it ended up being more like The Road. It was very bleak, and it was like, whoa, I thought it was going to be like, oh, I'm surviving in the woods with my dog, and it was more like, okay, everybody's dying.
Everybody's dying and everything is bad, and yeah, and it's bleak is a very good term for it. And it is a short book. I think it's 288 pages. I had a really hard time getting through it because I could only read a chapter or two at a time before I had to set it down and go do something else. It was really, we'll talk about that a little bit more, I think, as we go on here.
I burned through it. Like, I remember telling you, I was like, oh, I'm done the book. You're like, what?
Yeah, no, you were like, I'm going to read in the bath. And then you're like, okay, I'm 56% of the way through. And I'm like, wait a minute.
Yeah, because you were like, well, yeah, let me know if it's good and then I'll pick it up. Because we were trying to decide if we should read this one. I was like, yeah, I'll read this one and, I'll let you know how the first chapter goes or whatever. And then, yeah, I literally, I sat in the tub. My water was getting cold and I was like 40% done by the time I got out of the tub.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. So, I mean, before we get into it here, I just want to say for anyone who's listening, if you are interested in this book, you should probably stop the recording now and go and read it, and then come back to the podcast, and we will be here for you because I don't want to. It is a short book, and I don't want to ruin it for you. So, but let's go ahead and let's get right into it. And so we know from the synopsis that Lark and his immediate family, which is his mother and father, are passengers on board a boat full of refugees from North America, and they're headed toward Ireland. This is all we really know. The boat that they're on is like a former, like a yacht, like a pleasure craft that was intended for, maybe 10 people maximum. And in the book, Lark sort of estimates that there's more than 40 people crowded on board this boat, like desperately making this this passage to Ireland to escape. He and his mother are trying to be useful around the ship and do work around the ship and help people. His father's in really bad shape. He's been really terribly injured prior to getting on the boat. Somehow we don't know exactly what happened or how it happened or whatever. He's feverish. He's hallucinating. I think Lark says he's probably in sepsis at this point. His father had been a physician. And so we understand that that's how Lark and his mother sort of talked their way onto the boat. Like, oh, he's a doctor, he can help people, but he's not in good enough shape to do any doctoring. So, and we know that Lark's mother traded some seeds to the captain in exchange for allowing the three of them to get on board. And so this is like a valuable thing, these seeds that she has.
And nothing really came of that ever again. I was expecting the seeds to be like a huge MacGuffin.
Yeah.
And then as soon as he washes off of the boat, it's just like, oh, okay.
No, it's just seeds. That was her thing. And that was how they homesteaded, was that, his mother knew how to save seeds, I guess. I don't know.
I was expecting him to be like, oh no, I lost the seeds. And he just never mentioned it again.
I don't know. I guess that the seeds didn't make it back to land with him, but yeah, we're jumping ahead.
Sorry.
Okay, so Lark's father is not in any condition to do anything other than die in agony. The journey is predictably long and miserable. Some of the passengers fall ill and die, including Lark's father passes away at some point. And the ship runs into a storm. More people are lost. People are like swept, overboard. And they reach Ireland. They get within sight of land. And one of the reasons why they're headed here is because they have heard that Ireland is still accepting refugees from North America, right? But surprise, they're not welcomed with open arms. They are greeted with gunfire and drone fire. It's becomes pandemonium. Lark dives overboard with his mother and with a little girl. I think Charlotte was her name. This little girl that kind of they befriended. I think her mother died during the journey or something awful like that. Lark loses track of both of them in the water. He sees his mother, go under the waves and drown horribly. And he loses track of the little girl. And he sort of barely manages to get onto land, and he hides. And at this point, we get to go back during this moment of peace. We get to go back and kind of see what led up to the present moment of Lark, like being a refugee in Ireland and like hiding from gunfire. And so the backstory, and this is all the spoiler stuff because you don't know this when you go in to read the book. So the backstory is that when Lark was a child, the United States government was taken over by right-wing ideologues, whom he and his family refer to as the fundies. And these folks start disappearing undesirables, including Lark's aunts, who are lesbians. They're framed as terrorists or enemies of the state, or whatever. And, this is like a thing that's happening. That LGBTQ folks are quietly being carted off. Climate disaster is raging. There's food shortages, pretty severe food shortages. One of the things that happens is that because resources are so low, the government orders companion animals to be euthanized. And I want to stop here and talk about this because this was one of my major problems with this book. Mm-hmm. This is based on a real thing, right? Was it World War II?
I believe so, yes.
I think World War II in England, with food rationing, there was an edict that went out that, people, if they had pets, they should maybe do the kind thing, and rather than letting their pets starve to death, take care of them. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I can't even say it. It's so upsetting. But I don't think it was like foot soldiers were, walking through villages and making sure that every puppy and kitten
it definitely was not
or anything like that. It definitely was not.
It wasn't mandatory at all. It wasn't enforced. It was just suggested that you don't have a lot of food for yourself, let alone yourself and your pets. So you should consider this, because if you're splitting your food with your pets, then you might also be weakening yourself, blah, 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 blah. Mm-hmm. So people were willingly surrendering them and having them put down. There were also a lot of shelters that popped up that took them and struggled to try to take care of them. A lot of animals were just let loose to go fend for themselves. Mm-hmm. No one was hunting them down and shooting them, as far as I know. And they certainly didn't make dogs extinct across the entire world by doing this.
Yeah.
So
that was my thought, is that we know how well in the year of our Lord 2023, we know how well government edicts like that go down with people. People love their pets. People love their pets, beyond all sense and reason. And I just think a lot of people, would not be willing to do that. I think a lot of people would not be willing to put their pets down, but maybe would set them loose, and say, go with God,
A lot of the people who did do it said they really regretted it in World War II.
Yeah, I can imagine. And so I just had an issue with this. Like, there's no dogs anymore. Like, there's no cats anymore. Because everybody killed their pets. I just I just don't think it would happen.
And I also had an issue, and this is going to be a theme through the whole book, but I had an issue with it because hunting down and killing every single dog and cat in the world takes a lot of resources. And this whole economy is supposed to be resource poor. You're supposed
exactly.
We're literally saying we don't have enough resources, and yet we spend all this time literally hunting down dogs in packs of militia people, shooting them instead. Like, what? And despite the fact that we have no resources, apparently we have tons of bullets.
Feral animals are a thing. And, we have lots of resources now, and people are not, going out into the woods and ridding us of feral packs of dogs and cats and stuff like that. And I don't, maybe people would be hunting them for meat, which is kind of grisly, but,
I would have believed it if it was wild packs dogs, like people let their dogs loose into the countryside and then they went feral and turned into a danger, perhaps.
Yeah.
But the way it's depicted, like, dogs just don't exist anymore. And they're this mystical thing that people remember but nostalgically, but you've never seen one because you were born in the last 18 years. Like, that's not it. Just my sense of disbelief went.
Yeah, that was a tough one for me to get past. I really had a big problem with that. Have you ever heard of the feral dog packs in like Russia and Ukraine? Like they're like organized. They're like smart. And I think that if anything, we would maybe see a lot of that kind of activity. Very smart mixed breed wild dogs.
I was familiar with the beach dogs in Mexico. Like they know how to work the crowds, man. They know how to make a living off of tourists. So
yeah. So there's no dogs. There's no dogs in this book,
and no cats. I think cats were maybe mentioned once, but that was it.
No, just no cats whatsoever. Not even the ghost of a cat. Let's see. So they're resource poor. The government orders everyone to kill their dogs, and they all kill their dogs in this book. And Lark's parents, Lark's mother and father, are extremely upset when Lark's aunts are disappeared, and they decide that they're going to pack up. They're going to flee their home in Maryland, and they're going to take refuge in the Maine wilderness. And they end up taking along a friend of theirs, Phoebe, and her two children, Sarah and Arlo, who are roughly the same age as Lark. Sarah's a little bit older, and Arlo's like the same age. Why did they choose Maine? I don't know. Seems like a good place to disappear, I guess. Bahaba. Okay, so cut forward a few years. Lark and his family, survive for a while in Maine. I mean, helped along by his mother's skill with, gardening and householding and seed saving and all this stuff. And the kids all grow up together. And as Lark gets older, he starts to realize that he is attracted to Arlo, who's Phoebe's son. He's kind of vaguely aware that same-sex attraction is a crime in the world that his family has fled from, right? Blah, blah, blah. Eventually, the boys get together when they're teenagers. They have a happy few years as a couple together.
Should I put in my big pedantic, well, actually here?
Save
go ahead. That for later?
No, go ahead. Go right into it.
I feel like such a nerd. But actually, they probably should not have fallen in love because they were raised together as children. There's something called the Westermark effect, which they were studying why incest is so taboo in so many cultures. And they found that biologically, when you are raised together with someone, you are primed to not be attracted to them. And that's like some sort of evolutionary protection against incest and inbreeding, right? So this scenario actually isn't plausible either. Anyway,
I was just gonna
that's me
say, I was
being
just gonna say,
pedantic.
yeah. So you had an issue with that, and there's a scientific theory behind it. I was kind of thinking, I don't disagree with that take, but I was kind of thinking also of I can't think of the name for the phenomenon, but there's this observation that psychologists have made that when people undergo a traumatic or upsetting experience together, sometimes they have a really intense bond with each other, which is one reason why, like, if you really want to make an impression on someone you're dating, like, you could, like, go skydiving as your first date, so you have this terrible, scary experience together. And so, I mean, that's possibly a counterpoint.
Did they have trauma in their childhood, though? Because I felt like it was fairly peaceful. They went and hid in the mountains, and that was it.
Society fell apart a little bit.
But I feel like Lark spent a lot of time saying, like, oh, I didn't remember much of the before. We just went and lived in the mountains.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah. The term for that is literally traumatic bonding. So.
Traumatic bond. Okay, there you go. That makes sense.
Which is more logical than Westermark effect.
Yeah. And I mean, just to well, I don't even remember how I was going to finish that sentence. It did sound like Lark, had fond memories of that time. Growing up, it seemed like relatively peaceful. They were just sort of, living off the land and, didn't get hassled a whole lot. They had to, stay vigilant. But, mostly it seemed like things were pretty copacetic. And I know I read an interview with the author of this book where he said that he really wanted to tell, like, a tender love story between two men. And I hate to say it, I do kind of feel like it failed on that count, because we don't ever really get to meet Arlo as a character. He's just sort of this figure of Lark's interest. I don't think he even has very much dialogue in the book at all. Yeah,
he's like a phantom in my memory.
Yeah, very much like a cardboard stand-up.
Just kind of more of an idea than a character.
Yeah. So that didn't really work for me. But that's it's too bad. So
and unfortunately, that's the best part of the book.
It is. Yeah, it is. So this part of the book comes to a close. The woods take flame. And at the time I was reading it, I got the impression that it was like the evil right-wing government had come to, like, try and flush people out. But it occurred to me later that maybe this was like a climate-related event. Like, maybe
I thought it was
just
climate-related. Yeah, I thought it was just wildfire.
Okay, so maybe I made that up in my head.
It also bothered me that they're like, well, we can never live here again. It's like, you can live there again. It's going to be green again next year. I mean, the trees are kind of shitty now, but it'll grow again. You don't have to leave.
Yeah, no, they're just like, okay, well, we have to leave now. They head north. Apparently they've heard, I don't know from whom, but they've heard that there are boats sailing to Ireland, which is supposedly accepting refugees from the United States. Lark's mother says they need to get to Glendalough because there's ley lines there or something. I was very unclear on this. That maybe
it was like Celtic mysticism or something.
Yeah,
they thought it would have protection. Yeah,
it was something really vague and hand wavy like that. And yeah, so
that didn't bother me though, because when you have nothing to hold on to, you make shit up. Right?
I guess that's true. I guess that's a good point. That didn't really come across to me. I got very frustrated with the book because it wasn't clear to me what it was that they expected to find there, and it just really seemed like
find society, just like, oh, these people are here living perfectly normally, and we can join them, and everything's great now. Which is the kind of fantasy that you would hold on to in this sort of situation when the entire world is on fire and full of people who are trying to kill you. You're going to go somewhere where you think it's going to be safe. And then, And then it never is. Oh, spoilers, sorry.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. I guess I'm a little dumb. I needed to have that spelled out to me because I just didn't. Man, everything was so bad. And Lark was just like, I got to get there. And I'm like, why? Why do you think it's going to be any different there than it is right where you are? I guess I'm one of Harry Harlow's monkeys. I'm sitting at the bottom of the pit and I've given up. Okay, so the family has decided to move north. They're going to try and get to these boats that are going to Ireland. They cross the border into Canada, and it seems like they've made it through safely until suddenly, maybe like a day and a half after they've crossed, shots ring out. Sarah and Arlo are both killed. And we also need to stop here and talk about this because, Nico, I need to know, how bad do you think things would have to get before the Canadian Border Patrol goes to kill on sight?
Do we have a Border Patrol? we have no resources. So suddenly now we have an army. Wait, what?
I just can't see that. I think that if things here in the US got really bad and people were like literally trying to flee across the border, I think that the Border Patrol would at least like be there with like blankets and stuff, even if all they had to say was, you have to go right back where you came from. I'm sorry. We don't have anything here for you.
This would have made a lot more sense to me if it was more like the Half-Built Garden, where the countries don't exist anymore. The whole, everything's just dissolved, and now there's like little militias and anarchy everywhere. Because that's what the world that he's describing sounds like that, and yet we still have a Canadian border, and things are just fucked up everywhere.
Yeah. I had so much trouble with that. I just was like, I can't see a world where that would happen.
We'd be more like, no, stop. Please stop. You're going to have to turn around now. Sorry.
I was just imagining, the kids like drop. I guess they're not kids. They're like probably like 19, 20, 22 years old, like in there. But, they drop and they fall. They're bleeding out. And I could just imagine like a Mountie in the background going, sorry. Sorry about that.
You're going to have to head back home now, eh?
Yeah, we don't know where the shots came from. It's not made clear in the book. It could have been a hunter with poor eyesight, maybe, or
it could have been a thief. Like any of those things would have made more sense.
Yeah, but anyway, so Sarah and Arlo are killed by gunfire. Phoebe, their mother, loses her marbles at this point. She's freaked out. She's really mad at Lark's family. Somehow it's their fault. She stabs Lark's father in the leg really badly, and she kills herself.
That was just so extreme. Like, yes, they're under a lot of stress, but what the fuck? And I have this ongoing beef with all the characters in this book, that they act the way the plot demands that they act. They don't have consistency. And so that could have made sense if there had been more setup, if we had gotten to know Phoebe a little bit more about and had that sense of like, oh, okay, she's a little bit, unstable, and this situation's pushing her to the edge, and then that's where she snaps, right? But it was just kind of like, oh, there's Phoebe, she's my aunt, blah, 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 blah. Oh, she killed everyone. Like, what the hell just happened?
We really didn't get to spend time with any of those characters enough. And I just think, I just wish that this book had had more pages to breathe. Does that make sense?
Yeah. It needed more cooking, basically.
Okay, so where are we at? So Lark's father's been terribly injured. He can't walk. He and his mother carry his father. Basically, they manage to make it to where the boats are, and they barely manage to negotiate their way on board the ship, and that's where the book opens. So now we have all of the backstory. And we have as much of a mission as Lark is going to get, which is I have to get to Ireland, I have to get to Glendalough because there's magical ley lines and everything is going to be wonderful there. Normal. There's going to be a society there and I am going to live in it. So in the present moment, so Lark's in Ireland, he's hiding. He comes across an animal in the wilderness, and this animal turns out to be a dog. It is a beagle named Seamus. Am I saying that right?
Yep. Well, that's how I would say it. I don't know if it's right, but
we know his name is Seamus because he still has a collar with his name tag on it. And Seamus is very nervous, but he's also a very lonely dog, and he lets Lark coax him to shelter. We get a chapter told entirely from the dog's point of view, where we learn how his previous owner, an elderly man, kept him hidden from the authorities and refused to put him down. Just like I said, I think there probably would have been a lot more of that kind of thing happening, just saying. And the dog's owner eventually passed away, and Seamus slipped out of the doggy door and out into the wilderness to live on his own. And I think you had a reaction to that, Nico.
Well, I had a reaction to Seamus in general. And so when I'm rating books, I usually start at 5 stars and I whittle it down, right? And this book lost its first star in the first chapter, which we see from Seamus's point of view. And that it's kind of ironic because all the reviews on Goodreads are all like, oh, Seamus is my favorite character. I love these parts the most. And to me, it jumped out as someone who does not understand dogs, trying to write from the point of view of a dog, and then trying to justify why the dog is behaving like a human. Like, this dog is so completely anthropomorphized that it may as well have dialogue. It's a human character. It's a more human character than the human characters in this book.
A fair point, yeah.
It didn't ruin the book, but that dropped it to 4 stars for sure. Also, Lark feeds mushrooms to the dog. Mushrooms are extremely toxic to dogs. Do not feed mushrooms to your dogs. I'm sorry, I'm so pedantic, but it really bothers me.
I feel like I know enough about mushrooms that if I was surviving in the wilderness and hungry, I still would probably not venture to eat any mushrooms because it's very difficult even for experts to sometimes distinguish.
You know enough about mushrooms to know that you don't know enough about mushrooms.
Exactly. Exactly. Okay, let's see. So Lark and Seamus are best friends forever now. And they come across a strange, violent man who's roaming the wilderness. He's toting a young girl behind him on a leash. I have an exclamation point and a question mark in my notes here.
This is where it really starts feeling like The Road, right? Like, it's like, oh, you're just cribbing it straight from The Road now.
Oh, no. I haven't read The Road. I'm scared.
You probably should not read The Road, just from what I know about you.
That's why I'm scared. The Lark and the dog stumble across a little camp where a woman is roasting squirrels or a rabbit or something on a spit.
See, now if this was The Road, it would have been something else.
Probably would have been a
you should not read
baby
The
or
Road.
something. Yeah.
You nailed it.
Yeah. The woman's name is Helen. We don't learn a lot about her at this point. She shares her provisions with Lark and the dog, and she lets them stay. Even though she's resource poor, she shared with the dog. How about that? Seamus the dog likes her. She has a rifle, we find out. She explains to Lark that the reason why the boats were fired on is because the faction in power in Ireland, whom she calls the Nays, are anti-immigrant. So again, it sounds like right-wingers have sort of taken over operations.
Was there a vote? I'm assuming they're called the Nays because they voted on something and they all voted nay. But I can't remember if that was ever explicitly described.
I don't think it was described. I think it's just in general, like, nay, you nay may come here.
Well, that would be NAE though. And they were NAY.
Oh, okay. Well, the book was written by an American.
Yeah, that's true. That doesn't really mean anything.
So Lark tells Helen about the scary guy in the woods with the girl on the leash, and she says that it sounds like they were members of what she calls the banished. These are people who have worked with the Nays and like turned in rebels, and they get marked with a big B tattoo on the face, like a B is in the letter B, not a B is in like a honeybee. Just to make that clear. And she says they're dangerous people. They're not to be trusted. And Lark says he's going to Glendalough, and she apparently decides that's as good a goal as any, and they start to travel together. And it doesn't seem at any point Helen is particularly like fond of Lark, but she just is kind of like, okay, we're together now. She's kind of matter of fact about it. They come across, they start off, toward Glendalough, I guess, and they come across what appears to be a hastily erected camp full of children, that's got some really awful guards patrolling the grounds and prodding the children. And Lark thinks that one of the children in this camp looks like the little girl Charlotte that he lost on his way off the boat. And for some goddamn reason, he loses his mind at this point, and he just like runs toward the camp, without a plan or anything. He's just like gonna help the kids somehow, I guess. And and I have to say, like, he's wandering in the wilderness, he's malnourished, probably not in his right mind. This is not like a well-rested person who's making sound choices, but even so, like,
this is what I'm saying. Like, they act like idiots when it will advance the plot, and it's just like, that's not. I'm not buying that this character would have done that from what I know about them.
Yeah. I mean, just think about the kind of energy that it would take to do that, right? And you've been living on like mushrooms and grass and berries, like, I don't know, man. So the guards get alerted, shots are fired. Helen recovers Lark somehow, and they escape into the woods again. I wrote here in my notes, for some reason, Helen doesn't ditch his dumbass, which was exactly my reaction. I just was like, if I was Helen in this situation, I would have been like, you're crazy.
Yeah.
You can't be around me. You are a risk to my operation.
I'm trying to survive out here, and you're going to do that? Nope. Good luck.
Yeah, no, I'm taking the dog.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay, so they get away from the camp. We don't know what happens to the kids. They continue to venture on, and they come across they come across like some traps, right, that they're able to avoid, and eventually they come across unfortunately a situation where someone did not manage to avoid a trap. They find the crazy banished guy hanging from a snare. He's deceased. His daughter's beside him. She seems to be like catatonic. She's like babbling and doesn't seem to be aware of what's going on. Helen somehow produces a roll of duct tape from somewhere.
And she uses so much of it. I'm like, how don't you want to save your duct tape? You're not going to use an entire roll doing like what the
like I know it's good stuff, but this duct tape is, I mean, we're thinking it's like 18 years old at this point, right? Because
it's not like you can pop over to Home Hardware and grab another roll, right?
Exactly. But so she gets this duct tape. She, duct tapes the girl's hands together and attaches her to a tree. She's like wrapping her up. She's like, she's dangerous. You don't know what she's capable of. The girl's name is Ronan. She tries to persuade Lark that Helen is a bounty hunter known as the Black Fox, and that Helen is going to hand both of them over to the Nays. Lark, because he has to move the story in a particular direction, refuses to just leave Rona behind, taped to a tree. He's like, we can't do this. This is, this is beyond the pale. Helen, because she is apparently fond of Lark, allows Rona to tag along with them, but she insists that that Ronan has her hands bound, behind her, in front of her. It seems to change depending on what page you're on.
There's just so much sloppy editing.
No, there is a point where like Lark specifically says that Ronan's hands are like bound behind her back, but then like two sentences later she's lifting her hands up in front of her face. Maybe she's double jointed. I mean, we don't know.
Yeah, maybe she's just like
I don't know, no. but yeah, we both picked up on that. We were like, wait, no. this is not okay. And I think Nico and I both we're the kind of readers who like have the imaginary red pen, we can't ever just like read something.
Oh, boy, did I put red pen all over this though.
Yeah.
Did you notice how many times the word glowing was used?
No, I didn't. Glowing.
I did a search on my Kindle. The word glowing was used 19 times.
Oh my goodness.
Most of those times it was paired with the word green.
Glowing. But 19 times in a 288-page book.
Yeah, 19. The glowing green leaves, the glowing green grass, the glowing green. It's like, holy shit, everything's glowing. I know we're in Ireland, but...
That's once every 15 pages. A little math for you there.
I did not do that math when I wrote my notes, so...
Okay. Okay, so they've got... So they're four now. So it's Helen, Seamus, Lark, and Ronan. And they travel together for a few days. I guess they're still headed to Glendalough. Lark eventually gets this idea in his head that he's going to let Ronan loose for some reason. So he cuts her duct tape, the duct tape that Helen has plenty of. Ronan promptly grabs his knife, stabs Helen in the arm, kicks the shit out of the dog, and then throws herself off a cliff. So, smooth move,
Maybe a side effect of climate change is that everybody goes insane.
It could be. I mean, it could be. There's maybe lots of smog. Maybe the mushrooms had something to do with it.
All the microplastics in their brains.
The wee mushrooms. Okay, so Ronan is gone. She's wreaked all this havoc and she's taking care of herself. She has died. Seamus and Helen are in awful shape, but Lark gathers them up. They struggle on, and Helen was having like her reaction is described as pretty dramatic. Like all like the blood like is gone from her face. She's like ashen white, and she just seems like she's in shock.
It was another one of my overarching nitpicks, was especially after reading Leech. The medical descriptions in this book are so far off that it really pulls me out of like injuries don't work that way. and like you have a lot of things in here, like, the standard trope of someone gets knocked unconscious, but then they have no brain injury later. That one's typical. That doesn't bother me, but the dog becomes paralyzed from being kicked in the rib. That was very odd. And Helen's displaying what to me looked like concussion symptoms, but she got stabbed in the arm. Like there are some big arteries in your arm. It could have been blood loss, but that's not how it was described at all. And it happened like instantly. She's just instantly on the ground, white and like incoherent. And it's like, this is not how this works.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know about transporting somebody who's had like major blood loss, and I don't know. Anyway. So somehow Lark gathers them all up and they struggle along. They find Glendalough, and there is indeed a small community of survivors gathered there, perhaps 40 some people, I believe was mentioned in the book. They take in Lark, Helen, and Seamus and help them heal up. Seamus? I'm confused. Just Seamus, the dog. So they help the party heal up. Everyone survives, unusually. And sort of everything is kind of peaceful for a few weeks. But eventually the community representative tells Lark and Helen that the dog can't stay.
What the fuck?
Because he's a dog and they can't support him.
What the fuck? Because the dog can't work. Specifically because, dogs can't work. He's a beagle. Beagles are literally working dogs. And you know what they do? They hunt. Mm-hmm. And you know what you need when you're living in the post-apocalyptic wasteland? You need to hunt for fucking food with a dog. Jesus Christ. This part annoyed me. They lost many stars at this part.
Yeah, no, I was not convinced. Like everyone in the community loves this dog, but they're like, he's got to go. No dogs allowed.
Even if he can't work, the morale boost they were having in itself is worth the amount of food you have to feed.
Oh my God. So the Glendalough, community says you can stay until you're healed up. But they won't back down from the no pets policy. And Lark gets the impression that even though this is a community of survivors, there's all these people that are like coming together and surviving, in like the collapsed society. There's still like some political stuff happening. It's not a perfect community. So what Lark and Helen do is they set up their camp across the river, and that's that.
And then the book ends.
And then the book ends, and society kind of heals up, but it's never really quite the same in the end. And Lark has been telling us this story as like a very old man. He's looking back on his life, I guess. The end.
Oh, the ending was so rushed. It's just like they get to Glendalough, and then there's the bullshit about the dog getting kicked out, and then there's just like, and then they travel to the things happen, and then the end. It's like it felt like the author just wanted to be done with it and just to the end. And a lot of the reviews talk about how this is way outside of the author's usual genre, and I wonder if he decided to just be done with this experiment, or if another project came up that he was more interested in. I'm totally just speculating, but it just feels like it was a sprint to the finish and then dust your hands and walk away. It didn't feel polished or complete at all.
One thing that the author mentioned in the interview that I read is that he tends to work on more than one thing at a time. So I think there could well be something to your theory, Nico, that maybe this was a project that just kind of needed to get wrapped up. And so that's what happened. To I feel its detriment. So I wanted to like this book, and I just didn't. There just wasn't enough there, and there were just kind of too many problems with the setup and the execution, I think.
Well, this was on your to read list, right? What made you put it on your to read list?
So a couple of things caught my attention about this book. The title, "Lark Ascending," is the title of a piece of music that is very beautiful and that I happen to like very much, and it is referenced in the text.
A lot of people who wrote reviews about it said that's why they read the book too.
I mean, it is a really nice piece of music. You should look it up after we're done with our conversation. But so that caught my attention. And the fact that it's post-apocalyptic, and I thought, okay, I know Nico really enjoys that. So I'll add that to my list. Plus, it's short. I like short when it works.
Well, that is why I picked it out of the list of the god awful books we were looking through.
I just, yeah.
So what do you think about this future? You're saying it feels plausible.
It feels very plausible to me. It feels very much like the reactionary right wing, which has been playing a very long game in this country, has ascended to power in a way that is difficult to take back. I don't think that they represent the majority of people here, but they certainly have political will, and we have certainly seen a lot of trolling, I think, and a lot of sort of I shouldn't even say proto-fascist, it just fomenting a lot of hate and ire towards marginalized communities, LGBTQ communities, with all of the anti-drag stuff and the groomer talk. I'm making scare quotes around that. And we know that this is a thing that happened in Germany prior to the rise of the Nazi Party. Again, they targeted marginalized people. They targeted specifically, gay and transgender folks. And it does seem very plausible to me, especially in the wake of the fact that the Supreme Court has decided that, the Roe v. Wade decision is no longer standing, which is, it's scary. It's scary. And I think balkanization is the best case scenario at this point. And, I'm not a brilliant political analyst or anything, but I do think about this stuff, and I think we're headed to dark times. I don't necessarily think that society is going to collapse, but who knows?
Well, I feel like there's like two competing apocalypses in this book. So you have the climate change, which I feel like was really only sort of thrown in because it's topical, but then you have the rise of the right-wing fundamentalist stuff, which definitely feels very plausible to me as well. We're watching it happen, which is horrible. Yeah. And we're also watching climate change destroy the world as my province burns down year after year. I kind of wrote a little timeline of what was going on here and the things that didn't click for me. So we have climate change destroys the world. There's devastating fires that chases people out of areas, widespread famine, blah, blah, blah. That all makes sense. And then as a result of the fires and climate devastation, the governments around the world collapse. So that could happen. It seemed a little dramatic for it to dissolve that completely so quickly, but it could happen. The quote is like, we're 3 meals from anarchy or something, right?
Right.
And then in the vacuum of the governmental collapse, the fundamentalists took over. So I could see that happening too, because the regular governments are gone. There's a void, so it gets filled. But then they take control of all the guns. The quote from the book is, they opposed gun control until they controlled all the guns. That is too real, much too real. But then throughout the book, the fundamentalists are using high technology. They're using drones to hunt people down and enslave them. Like, I could see that happening if we didn't have such a resource scarce environment going on. But it wasn't explained in the book. But maybe they're hoarding all of the resources and electricity. That could make sense. But it was not described that way in the book, which bothered me. Maybe they're the ones cutting the electricity, who knows? But they have way too much time to focus on spreading all their ideology when the other government collapsed completely because they're scrambling to survive. So why is this government not scrambling to survive? That's what didn't work for me. They're going full Mad Max Holocaust, but they have high technology, and it just didn't make sense. And then the fundamentalists took over, but they outlawed mass, which is like a religious thing, or was that the Nays in Ireland? And one of them outlawed. Yeah,
it was Ireland now. And remember the situation in Ireland is that some of the population is Catholic and some of the population is Protestant, and that is a very that's a very long running and deep divide in their society.
Okay.
So I'm assuming that if they outlawed mass, that it's the Protestants that are in control.
But then again, same things happening over in Ireland, like the exact same scenario. They've taken over, and they have so many guns and drones and everything, they can shoot at anyone who's coming by. But yet they're still out of resources over there. Yeah. So that was weird.
And that reminds me of another thing I had an issue with, which was the camp full of children. Like, why?
Yeah.
Why? If they're shooting, if they're shooting refugees on site, like, why would they specifically gather up children and, feed them a handful of rice a day to keep them barely alive? Like, why not just put them down? If they're really so resource short. And I kind of felt like the motivation for that was kind of like, what if we were the refugees? What if it was our children in the camps? And I mean, I'm not saying that that's a bad thing to think about. It is a good thing to think about, but it's maybe not enough to hang a novel on. Right.
And, speaking of putting them down, they also had to destroy every cow because of diseases.
Oh, yeah, the cows.
Yeah.
The cows.
What disease? It didn't explain what disease. And why did this happen as part of climate change? There's no, like, I'm sure a disease can come up because of climate change, but it wasn't explained what. And then they took care of it by destroying them, just leaving their diseased corpses lying all over the fields. They walk past all these diseased cow corpses all the time. If you're getting rid of a disease, you don't leave the diseased corpses out in the fields. I'm just saying.
Good point. A good point.
You're expending your resources to destroy them and then just leaving their diseases out there. You're not making any use of the resources that you're destroying.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I had many problems with the book. It was just a little bit too sloppy for me to buy it.
Did we learn anything from this book?
I learned that dogs are just tiny furry humans, and apparently that they can't work and that they're worthless and they do nothing but suck down half of your food. Who knew?
But they're very good boys.
Yeah,
they're very good boys. I think I mentioned to you that the lesson, the overarching lesson that I'm learning from these books that we've been reading for the podcast is that don't get on a boat. Never get on a boat. It's a bad idea. You're going to die, or be enslaved. Just don't do it. Would we recommend this book?
I like it's a quick read, but there's so many issues with it. I also, one of the things that really annoyed me is it was really expensive. When I went to go, well, at least in Canada, it was really expensive. On Goodreads, it says it's like $12.99, which is like a pretty standard Kindle price. But it was on Amazon, it was like $35, and then it was, generously marked down to $18. And I was like, fuck off! What the hell?
Oh my gosh! Wow!
I was very annoyed. And then I read it, and I was even more annoyed.
Well, yeah, I think I would maybe recommend this book to not a genre reader. Right.
It's almost a YA book in terms of style, right? Yeah,
I did have that thought too, that the language is very simple and it reads like a book maybe for older elementary grade. But the subject matter, absolutely not.
Yeah. It's almost like Where the Red Fern Grows level of like, it's a quick, easy read, but also holy shit, what a nice read.
Yeah. Yeah. Would you read other books by this author?
After this experience? No, like not like I wouldn't blacklist him, but I'd be very skeptical. I'm actually curious to read something in his usual genres, right? Because this was an experiment. So I'm curious to compare in that way.
I would like to read another book by this author. I think I would probably pick something with a bigger page count. Very specifically, like I want to see what he could do with more of a chance to let a story breathe. I did notice that there is a book that he co-wrote, and it's for middle grade readers. I think I marked it because I was thinking about picking it up to read with my son. My son will be in 4th grade next fall. Let me see if did I add it here? I did not. That's not helpful. Let's look up the author's name. The author is Silas House. And this book the title is Same Son Here. It is co-written by Silas House and Neela Vaswani. And this is a middle grade book, and it is a story of 2 American kids who are pen pals. One is an Indian immigrant girl in New York City and a Kentucky coal miner's son. And they share their true selves across the miles, and it sounds very wholesome. And it is actually longer than this book. It is 297 pages. So I might check that out. I like I said, I wanted to like this book, and I feel like I saw like little sparks good prose, but anytime I would start to feel like, okay, like we're getting warmed up now, we're going to get into some good stuff. Like the sentence was over and we were just moving on to something else. And it was like, oh, come on, man.
I read the first 40% in like an hour in the top, right? So it really grabbed me. It was a page turner, but then the second half just fell apart. And then if you put any logic to it, it just doesn't stand up at all.
Yeah, and I like some of the things that we talked about. Like, I just wish that it had been more clear to me what Lark expected and wanted to find. And I think you got there, but I wasn't able to get there on my own because my brain is full of holes. Let's see. Do you have a list of other potential titles of interest? Did you compile any notes about that kind of thing?
Well, The Road, obviously, if you like
The Road,
bleak, horrible, post-apocalyptic hellscapes, then The Road. I think I described this book as The Road, but without the annoying literary structure of Cormac McCarthy, so I stand by that assessment. And then if you would like a dystopian book, there's so many dystopian books that if you like dystopian books, then there's lots out there, but there's The Dog Stars, which is a post-apocalyptic story of a guy with a dog. So that one might be interesting for someone who wants this style of book. It's a more adult version, of course, but
okay, yeah, I'm definitely gonna look that up. I wanted to, I'm gonna kind of cue off of the author's stated intention of wanting to write like a tender romance between two men. That happens to be a genre that is very close to my heart. I'm a big enthusiast. And I did feel like this book kind of failed on that count. I mean, for reasons that I pointed out, but I have two recommendations to anyone who would like to read a tender male romance in genre. The first one that I would recommend is The House in the Cerulean Sea by author T.J. Klune. This is a book that is like, it's like a Pixar movie in novel form, basically. And the basic setup for the story is that the main character is this bureaucrat who works for an agency that oversees like boarding houses, I guess, where children with magical abilities are sequestered. Basically, and he lives this very boring life. He checks all the boxes, and he goes home to his cat every night, and doesn't really have very many friends, and has this very boring life. And he gets this assignment to go visit a particular boarding house for magical kids, and kind of check out the situation and report on it. Right. And this is like it's framed as like this super important assignment, and it comes, directly from the board of the agency or whatever. And so he travels, he packs his bags and he travels, and this little house is on a little island, and it's very beautiful, and it's very different from his life. I think he lives in like London or something, and it rains all the time, and it's on the Cerulean Sea, and so everything is like Technicolor, and he meets all of these children with these various magical abilities, and they really win him over. And the headmaster, I guess, in charge of the house is an older man who seems kind of mysterious but kindly, and he just gets to know like the people on the island and how the kids are kind of shunned by the community around them. And the romance in the book is I like it because it's between, sort of two non-standard kind of characters, like the bureaucrat, the boring, balding bureaucrat who maybe struggles with his weight a little bit. And then the middle-aged man, who's got the crinkles on his eyes when he smiles or whatever. And the romance part of it is very much like a B plot, if not a C plot. It's very much more about like the kids and what happens with the kids. This book took some flack, I think, because it was inspired by the residential school system. And a lot of people, there are people who, have family members, who went through that or were impacted by that in some way. And I think there was a lot of sort of feeling that this wasn't, like, it's not your story to tell. The author's, a white man, I don't know where he's from, and they maybe felt that he treated the subject matter flippantly. I didn't know that going into the book. I didn't know what the inspiration was. I didn't have a particular reaction to it. I mean, it's a book that's written in a very sweet way. And I did enjoy it, but I want to kind of point that out, in case that's a sensitive subject for anyone. But top notch romance story there. Pretty enjoyable. And like I said, it really is like a Pixar movie. And I could imagine a world in which Pixar turned it into a movie. I feel like that's unlikely to happen in today's political climate, but there it is. And the other recommendation I have is a book that I read a couple of years ago when it came out. And this book, if you know me, you've heard me talk about this book a zillion times. It is The Darkness Outside Us, written by Eliot Schrefer. It is a science fiction novel, a young adult science fiction novel. And the story is two young men have been chosen as representatives of Earth to go on this deep space mission, ostensibly to save an expedition that went out to, I think, one of the moons of Saturn and disappeared. But it turns out, dun, 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 that, the mission isn't exactly the way it's presented to them. And it's just these two kids really on the ship together with an AI that's controlling them and not necessarily being 100% honest with them. And they have to figure out what's really going on. And they trauma bond, I guess. But it's really interesting to me the way that their relationship builds and changes depending on the circumstances, and it has a really beautiful ending. I read this book 3 times. I think I read it twice through in print, and then I listened to it on audio immediately afterwards, and it's really excellent, and I enjoyed it a lot and highly recommend. So that's me. And I think, do you have any closing thoughts about LARK Ascending?
Not really.
We talked out.
We don't want to start bitching about more things that I'm finding in my notes, but yeah.
We did enough of that. Yeah, I think I feel bad. I do kind of feel bad. I wanted more. I wanted more from this book, but
it was so promising when I started it, and I was like, this is finally, we have a good book on our podcast. And then the second half was like, nope.
Oh, that trombone. All right, man. Well, until next time, you can find us on social media. Maybe we are still on Twitter, if that's still a thing. We are Robot Elf BC Pod. On Tumblr, we are Robot Elf Book Club. If you're on Tumblr, please follow me. Unless you're a spam bot, please don't follow me. I will block you. We are on YouTube as Robot Elf Book Club, and you can send us an email if you so choose. We are robotelfbookclub@gmail.com, and we will be back in March to discuss The Keeper 6 by old favorite Kate Elliott. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.